lonely and downtrodden, the convict, people he identified with all his life. Cowboy Jack Clement came to work for Sam Phillips on June 15, 1956, and he and Johnny began a friendship and working relationship at Sun Records that was to last for the rest of their lives.
Well, a week or so after I went to work at Sun Records in 1956, went there in June of '56, and whenever he came in off the road the first time, as I recall, it was a week or so, and he came by, dropped by the studio. I don't think he recorded that day. He just came by. He and Sam probably went to lunch next door at Taylor's Restaurant. And I met him, and I liked him immediately. We seemed like we sort of clicked. He had a great rhythm, you know. Well, yeah, sometimes it was magnificent. And he and I would strum a lot together. And it had a lot to do with that boogie-woogie black gospel beat that we both heard around Memphis. I grew up about 8 miles out of Memphis, out on Highway 61, and he lived over in Arkansas, but it's only, I don't know, 40, 50 miles from Memphis. So we both heard the same radio stations and all that stuff. So when I first met him, we had a lot in common musically.
It was Jack who taped the famous $1 Million Quartet session at Sun.
Carl, it was his session. Jerry Lee Lewis playing piano. We hired him to play the piano. Elvis showed up toward the end of the session, and then Johnny Cash had come by. So the four of them were there, and the session's over, and they're out in the studio talking, telling stories and jamming and stuff. And Sam had gone next door to Taylor's Restaurant. So I'm sitting in the control room, and I turn the mics on, and there's all this going on. And I remember I stood up and I said, well, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't record this, so I put a tape on and started recording it. Then I went in the studio, moved a couple of mics around. The mics were still out there, so some of them were on wheel rollers, so I moved them around and let it roll. It was about an hour and a half of that stuff. And I never thought much about it. And you didn't pay much attention to it. Every once in a while I'd dig it out and listen to the part where I'm talking, asking him about bluegrass and stuff. But the tapes just sat there, and then years later they get put out as an album, the $1 Million Quartet.
Cash began touring in earnest with the likes of Farron Young, Roy Orbison, and Johnny Horton. He had only been playing professionally for 2 years. In 1957, he made the first of his many TV appearances on The Jackie Gleason Show and continued his touring, appearing in California and Canada. He was well received and made the most of it, playing as many dates as he could while releasing his first album on Sun and working with Jack Clement on Ballad of a Teenage Queen.
Jack Clement wrote that. Dream on, teenage queen, you should be, you know, that Jack Clement, when Jack Clement gave that, had John record that song. I mean, he wrote that song, he wrote, what was the other one? And they're sort of tongue-in-cheek. So, and see, as much that John wrote songs for himself, he also was not adverse to recording other people's songs as well. He knew a good song when he heard it.
He didn't let me produce Johnny Cash at first, but I played guitar on a bunch of the sessions after I got there. Like Ballad of a Teenage Queen, which I also wrote, played that guitar on it. And also on Guess Things Happen That Way. And Big River, I played that guitar and bass drum at the same time.
When not recording, Cash hit the road. While on these whirlwind tours, Cash was introduced to amphetamines. In the days before tour buses and jet airplanes, the grueling schedule of performance, all-night drives to the next town, again and again and again, could wear any man down, and uppers were a way to bridge the gap. Soon, Cash had a serious addiction that was to plague him for many years, and some say, take years off his life. "1958 was a stormy and successful year for Cash. He had pestered Sam Phillips to let him cut a gospel recording, but Phillips refused, thinking it would dilute the rockabilly country image of Cash. But Cash believed that he should sing what came from the heart. It was a statement of firmly held personal conviction, and the refusal to be labeled became a Johnny Cash trademark. In the years to come, he would cross over all music genres, from gospel to rock and country and back again. His farewell recording for Sun was an album of Hank Williams songs. He signed with Columbia Records just weeks after his departure from Sun, and he made a well-received gospel recording for Columbia the following year. He appeared on British TV and with Burl Ives on American TV and gave the first of his famous prison concerts at San Quentin, California. Among the convicts in the audience that day at San Quentin was a young Merle Haggard, who was to become a star within a few short years, following in the footsteps of Johnny Cash.
Elvis, you have some screaming fans out there.
In 1960, Elvis Presley was discharged from the Army.
If it wasn't for them, I'd have to re-up in the Army, sir, I'll tell you.
And Johnny appeared in his first film. 5 Minutes to Live was a mostly forgettable flick with Cash playing the kidnapper villain holding a family for ransom. The film also featured future Academy Award-winning director Ron Howard, known at the time as Opie from The Andy Griffith Show. But Johnny never allowed his acting gigs to get in the way of his music. Always on tour, Johnny expanded the Tennessee 2 to 3 with the addition of a drummer, Fluke Holland. And in December, June Carter appeared with the show for the first time, soon becoming a regular, sparking rumors of a love affair between Johnny and June. But in 1961, Johnny was still married to Vivian, who had recently given birth to their fourth daughter, Tara. The family moved to Casitas Springs, California, a place Johnny loved for its nearness to hunting and fishing and places where he could be alone. But his busy touring schedule, coupled with growing numbers of appearances on TV, meant that he was often gone for months at a time, staying only briefly when he did return. In 1962, he played the Hollywood Bowl with Patsy Cline and toured Britain for the first time. He traveled to Korea to play for the troops, all the while performing concerts across America. But the pill popping and his hectic schedule were starting to catch up with him, resulting in uneven performances and strained vocal cords. When Johnny was finally booked at Carnegie Hall, a big deal for the up-and-coming country star, his voice was just a whisper and he was unable to sing.
The show consisted of George Jones, the Carter family, the Statler brothers, that was, and I think not Merle Kilgore. Maybe Merle Kilgore was on that show. I'm not sure. And the second half, John would do. Okay, that was the first half of the show. This was at Carnegie Hall. John comes out and sings with the Statlers and the Carter family. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? And you could barely hear him. He's got the mic really up to his, when they crucified. I mean, literally, he's straining. After they finished, Gordy, and he proceeded to talk, and he says, I'm not supposed to be, I shouldn't even be out here. And he's talking very low, and you can barely hear him. He says, look, he said, I could understand you came to see me, and wasn't the show great up to this point? Hey, all right, you got to see something. He says, George Jones, blah, blah, blah. He says, but if you feel you're going to get beat, you know, I'll take the blow, I'll take the brunt of it. Go out to the front and get your money back. He says, because I can't sing. He says, but what I'll do, he says, let's share the evening together. I think maybe one or two people got up. I was up. I wasn't downstairs, I was upstairs, so I got a better view of what was going on. The place was sold out, packed. A couple people got up and walked to the back, to the back. He goes, leaves the stage. He comes back out with an old lantern, the old train lanterns, and a stool. He tells them, he puts on the lantern, puts the stool down, puts it next to him, and tells them to lower the lights, the house lights. And he's sitting there with the lantern, telling stories about when he was a kid, about how the songs came about, like 5 Feet High and Rising in Diaz, Arkansas, how the water came. He said, Dad kept saying, hey, how high is the water, Mama? And she said, oh, it's about 2 feet high and rising. And he said, that's where I got the inspiration to write that song. And he told all these anecdotes about all these different, and how he got to record for Sun Records, and things and all these kind of stories. And he had the audience in the palm of his hand.
In 1963, Johnny recorded the June Carter song Ring of Fire, which quickly rose in the pop charts. And in September, Cash appeared on Hootenanny for the first time. Hootenanny was a TV show geared to the burgeoning folk and country revival. At the time, folk singer Pete Seeger and his group The Weavers had been blacklisted from the show because of their left-leaning politics. Many artists, including Bob Dylan and Joan Baez, chose to boycott the show because of the blacklisting. But others, such as Cash, Theodore Bikel, the Limelighters, and Judy Collins, decided to appear anyway. They had varying but similar reasons for doing so. Many thought that by appearing, they would in fact help Seeger's cause and the right of musicians and others to speak freely. The clamor over Seeger's politics was soon to be experienced firsthand by Cash when he released The Ballad of Ira Hayes. The Ballad of Ira Hayes, an indictment of the plight of Native Americans, was written by folk singer Peter Lafarge. Ira Hayes was a World War II Marine veteran, a Pima Indian who was one of 6 Marines immortalized for their heroic raising of the American flag at Iwo Jima in the South Pacific. Upon his return to the States, Hayes drifted into obscurity and poverty on the Pima Reservation, dying of alcohol and exposure in the Arizona desert at the age of 32. Cash recorded Ira Hayes and incorporated the song into a concept album highlighting the plight of Native Americans called Bitter Tears. He released Ira Hayes as a single, but country DJs refused to play the song. Cash responded by taking out a full-page ad in Billboard, chastising the program managers and DJs for not playing it. When the album Bitter Tears was released, music critics praised Cash, who had truly broken out of the pure country genre. It was hailed as one of the best LPs to come out of the 60s folk movement. But for Johnny, it marked the beginning of a lifelong effort to improve conditions, not just for Native Americans, but also for all those on the outside looking in. Johnny appeared at the Newport Folk Festival that summer, not a typical stage for country musicians, but Johnny and the Carter family were of a different breed.
Knew the Carter family because they always came to the festival, so that would be where I saw Johnny too. The Carter family and Maybelle Carter and June was always very sweet to me. She's a very nice woman. Country singers per se, that is contemporary country singers, did not come to Newport.